Hey everybody, what's going on? This is Bart coming to you from TST Industries in Florida with another episode of TST Garage. In today's episode, I have the new generation Honda Grom in the shop with me, and we will be discussing the installation of the TST Industries Fender Eliminator on that bike. Now, in front of me, you see three different versions of this Fender Eliminator. The main building block of this set is our undertail. It is a small little fairing made of injection molded thermoplastic ABS. We have actually put a lot of thought into this. Didn't want to just slap something in there, possibly a milled piece or something like that. We wanted to actually close out the undertail with the same curvature that would continue its body lines. In addition, we wanted to make sure that we could hit all the needs of the riders out there, whether it be having a fixed rear mount, adjustable rear mount, or even the low mount version of license plate hardware. We were really wanting to make sure that each one of these mounting systems is available for you guys so you can choose the one that works best for you. Now, we also like to provide an undertail fairing by itself for those guys that use either a swing arm mount or for some reason, have the Grom for track use and just want to close out that hole left behind by the fender that is unneeded for the track. So this kit is actually available as a closeout set. Comes with all the hardware necessary to just make an installation to cover that hole and make your undertail actually smooth and continuous, and you basically look like the bike rolled out of the factory that way. This piece is color matched and texture matched to the undertail of this bike. It's really just a congruent part. It looks like it's part of the bike. That's how we do things here at TST Industries. Let me give you a couple different details on these parts. What you see here and here are the two different versions of the static mounting hardware. This mounts your license plate in the back. It is a fixed angle bracket. It is made of stainless steel. Then it's powder coated black for a stealthy look. All of the hardware that we use is stainless steel, so it will likely outlast your bike. Same goes for the low mount, same materials, similar features. It is a fixed mount, so there's no adjustability there. Here on the flagship version, which is the Elite-1 adjustable, you unlock these hinges and you're able to fine tune the angle to your liking. And in addition, all of these components here are made of CNC machined aluminum. They are black anodized, also very durable stuff. And like I said, with all of our kits, we send stainless steel hardware that will last you the life of your bike. In this particular video, we will be focusing on the pre-configuration and installation of these rear mount sets only. If you require the steps necessary for the installation of the low mount, we did shoot a separate video and it will be linked in the description of this video, so you can look for that there. Now that we know what we're working with, let's go grab some tools, go on over to the bike and start wrenching. We will begin by removing the seat here. And then we will remove the license plate off the stock setup here. We will reuse whatever hardware came with your Grom to reattach the license plate to the new setup. If for some odd reason you don't have any of this hardware, there are sets available for purchase from our website, tstindustries.com. We have these reflective sets, and then we also have this really nice countersunk anodized aluminum washers coupled with stainless hardware that also looks really good on this setup. Now, I have a quick note to make here. We are about to remove the entire fender. That means we are removing the signals and the license plate light. Something will have to be done about retaining signaling functions, and for those guys who want to run a license plate light, in our store it's pretty much split 50-50. Some do, some don't. For those of you guys that do want to run a license plate light, we do have one available for purchase. It is a separate unit. We don't shove this down everybody's throat. Those who want to purchase it do. The ones that don't, obviously freedom is choice, so the choice is yours. Now here you see our integrated taillight already mounted here. We are actually using the signals within this capsule. That is also an option that you can use for retaining signaling functions on your bike. We also sell pod signals of different kinds. We have several different choices. This is just an example. It's our BL6 lamp. This comes in smoked or clear. We have mounting kits that attach these signals to the license plate bracket. The wiring for this unit would have to come from the removal of this sub harness from the removed fender. The actual taillight comes with a self-contained harness that plugs all of the functions in. None of our components require splicing. Really, this is all plug and play stuff. Just wanted to mention that before we begin. All right. Once we're in here, we will need to mechanically remove the fender and also disconnect it electrically. For that purpose, we'll jump up top and show you this from this perspective. At this point, we will need to find the electrical connection from the fender equipment to the bike. It is contained on the left side of the bike. The connector is in a boot, and it looks like this. 4 conductors, yellow, blue, orange, and green wires leading into it. We need to take the boot off, and there is an unlock feature here. Press it down, pull them apart, and now this will be able to be routed back through to the underneath. We first have to drop the fender. These 4 10mm head fasteners will need to come out. I'm using a 10mm socket for that purpose. Once I get to the last one, I will need to support the fender from the bottom. Now that the fender is loose, we also have the whole undertail loose. If we slowly start pulling back on the fender, we'll notice that the routing of this particular wire to all the fender electricals is through and under the left frame rail. So we will have to get it around, make sure it doesn't snag on anything, forward it to the hole that goes through the subtray. Fairly straightforward. This all comes off. If you are running an integrated taillight, our integrated taillight will just plug right into here for the signal connection. If you are going to be using any other type of signals, like some of our pod signals, maybe some other brand signals, this sub harness will need to be taken out. So for that purpose, we will remove this 10mm head fastener. And then we have 4 Phillips head fasteners here. There is a tab up here engaging on the steel part here. This entire shroud needs to be cleared from that tab. Could potentially just pop it off on the bottom and pull it in this direction. Once we gain access in here, the rest is pretty simple. This harness here forwards 1 plug down here to the license plate light. We simply just pull that out. We'll grab pliers for that purpose. There is a metal tab that just bends down and holds this harness down. All we have to do is pry it up, and that clears the harness. If we slip this boot off, we gain entry right into where all the connectors are for the signaling equipment. These are bullet connectors, pretty simple, self-explanatory. Just disconnect them like so, and now our harness is free. Again, I was explaining before, I'm just going to reiterate really quickly. If you are not using external signals, this is redundant. Skip these steps. If you are, then you will need to see this. We'll likely shoot a separate video showing the installation of the various different types of signals we have on the rear of this bike. This will actually include the connection of this harness. Here we have just same signal connectors as the connectors that are outfitted on our TST Industries pod signals. So the connection will actually be very, very easy. All right, since This is not part of the Fender Eliminator module. We'll put this away and get back to this topic in the appropriate video. For now, we will go back to the table and pre-configure the appropriate Fender Eliminator for this video, and then I will show you how to install it on this bike. Okay, since we are focusing on the rear mount version of the Fender Eliminator in this video, we have two different variants to consider. This is our adjustable, this is our fixed angle setup. I have pre-assembled these to show you the final configuration we're going to be working towards, and then we still have two remaining sets of hardware that help to attach these components to the bike. Now I'm going to go through these two setups one at a time. We're going to focus on this one more than this one because this one is very simple. I'll demonstrate all the steps and then I'll mimic them while I install the final version, which is our flagship adjustable. One thing I just want to note here before we move forward, these undertails do not have a hole for wiring pre-drilled because there are many ways to attach a license plate bracket to this setup, and our previous setup that we've already done, the low mount. So we just left it up to you, but we did provide special guiding hole centers should you choose to run wiring. For a license plate light, like we usually do, which is a separate unit, but is available in combination with our Fender Eliminators, the wire is very, very slim, so it'll require a smaller hole. If you are running external signals that will be attaching to here and here, we do have those kits, but then with the combination of two wires from this signal, two from this one, and the wire from the license plate light, you will require a larger hole. So in order to not convolute the shape of this undertail with many holes and make it into a Swiss cheese, we decided to give you hole centers for all these different applications, and then the rest is up to you. I will demonstrate on this adjustable setup how to drill an appropriate hole. For this one, I'll just show the pre-assembly and the assembly on the bike. Let's get started. So the Elite-1 standard version of the rear mount Fender Eliminator comes to you looking like this. You have your undertail, bracket, and hardware. Let's empty the hardware and set it up so we can easily identify what each part does. This is the orientation. We fasten this guy through this onto the subtray and frame. We will put the machine screws through the bottom with the small washers interfacing between the head of the screw and the bracket. That will go through here and go up through the top, through the subtray, through the frame, and get capped off with the larger washers, and then two machine thread nuts. Then for the rear of this setup, which is really the front of the bike, we have bosses that will require an actual thermoplastic self-threading screw going through another large washer. So this is our hardware set that we have. Let me complete this here. Washer screw. Washer screw penetrates to the top. We will get this entire pre-assembly under the bike fitted into the subtray. These two will penetrate through the subtray and frame. Then we cap these connections like so, large washer nut, and then we have this pair of hardware, large washer and self-threading screw. This goes into each one of these bosses, and we'll use a 10mm socket on this nut while holding the bottom with a 4mm Allen, and over here on this screw we'll just need a Phillips screwdriver. Obviously we have two of each, and that is basically how this is attached to the bike. Our Elite-1 adjustable version of the Fender Eliminator gets to your door configured like this. You have your undertail panel, you have your adjustable license plate bracket, and the hardware that accomplishes the mounting of these components to the bike. So first we'll need to pre-configure this, and then using these extra components, we'll get it assembled onto the bike. So let's do this. Let's identify some hardware. For now, we don't have to consider any of this hardware that comes separately in the assembly. Since this is contained in a separate bag, it's really easy to just grab the appropriate hardware and components here. And I have this method of laying things out in a way that makes the actual installation very, very simple. All right, we have our main flat bracket that accomplishes the mounting of the license plate itself. We have two L brackets that are mirror image of each other. They are actually not the same bracket. One is for the right side, one is for the left side. If you notice, in reference to this part of it, the mount for the flat bracket is actually on an angle. We will have this sloping up so that when we apply this bracket to these components, the end result will be hanging the license plate at this angle. The angle will be adjustable via these components being hinged, but we want to start with this orientation. Here we have what we call our hinge bosses. They are the hinges for this mechanism, and they install to the undertail. If you notice, one of the sides is straight and the other one is arced. The arced side we want to have towards the rear of the bike, towards the part that goes right under the tail light. So this will end up looking like this. Let's put them here. I'm mainly placing these components in an orientation that they will build into. We have a flanged nut ×2 that will go behind these guys, and then we have a small countersunk screw that will go in front. Goes through here, then the L bracket, and then the flange nut caps that connection. Then we have M6x12 screws along with their washers that accomplish this connection. So the hinge screws are these guys, and then these countersunks accomplish that connection. I have a quick note here. We are using machine thread, and there is a considerable amount of vibration during the riding of these bikes, so we want to protect our investment by locking the threads into all of the components. Now, these little countersunk screws go into nylock locking nuts. No problem there. No thread lock necessary. Even these hinge points do not contact any plastic. So if you were to apply standard thread locking compound to this connection, you'd be good to go. Problem exists, or the issue exists, when you take one of the mounting bolts that is provided for the mounting of this entire assembly through this ABS injection molded piece into these hinge bosses. If you were to apply this to this connection, a standard non-aerobic thread locking compound will likely degrade the plastic and cause it to crack, and it will affect the longevity on your system, also void your warranty. So please do not apply standard non-aerobic thread locking compounds to that connection. If you feel that you need some kind of thread locking compound, and we do recommend it, then I would say use the VC3 Vibratite that is available pretty much anywhere on Amazon, many different places. It's not expensive, but this is a plastic safe thread locking agent. So since this is the recommended agent, I will basically pre-apply it to all the threads that I recommend having some kind of thread locking compound. I've taken these larger screws out of our mounting hardware. That accomplishes mounting of the entire set to the bike. Since I am doing the thread lock right now, that is what I'm going to use. All right, so now that we have our stuff prepped, let's start the assembly. I like to go and assemble the hinges first. I will demonstrate how that goes. Since we had the arced part towards the viewers here and a flat part here, and take it like this and assemble it with the arced part towards our sloped feature on the L bracket. Engage these screws. They use a 4mm Allen to fasten. We'll go to bottom out, but not tighten all the way. We'll repeat the steps here. Okay, I have a note to make here on this little sub-assembly. The hole in the angle bracket, in the L bracket, that engages with the hinge boss is large enough to accept the hinge boss's little protrusion. We want that protrusion to engage with the hole, be concentric, and actually pop in, because that is what makes the hinge mechanism work well. So here I try to get these tight enough so that I still have a little bit of adjustability, but not too tight. Obviously, we will adjust the final angle of the license plate hanging on the bike. So just want to demonstrate exactly how I pre-assembled these. Slope part here, arced feature here, and we have them facing out. Now we will go in the middle hole, get that screw through our slot in the angle bracket, get this nut engaged here, and this hardware connection needs a 3mm Allen and an 8mm hex for the nut. Here I'm using a nice ratcheting box wrench. Again, I'm going to try to get decently tight so I don't have a sloppy sub-assembly, but I also want to be able to vary the width of this assembly here when we go and adjust it for the proper hanging width on our undertail. And this will happen once we get on the bike. This is why I don't like when these things rotate too much. It becomes very cumbersome in the assembly. Okay, now before I move any further, I like to make sure that with the hole choice that I've made, I can still achieve the appropriate width for mounting onto my undertail. So I basically just take this component, look through the holes, and make sure I could achieve the width that mounts these components together. And in fact, I'm good here. So at this point, we could reintroduce the mounting hardware, hop on over to the bike, and then I'll show you guys how to get this mounted to the bike. If you're one of those guys that has opted to run our license plate light or another license plate light, and perhaps you want to run signals on all of these components, we do sell signal sets that attach via L brackets to the back of your license plate bracket and license plate assembly and stick out here. You can find those on our website. We also have an integrated taillight that doesn't require having any signals on here. Choice is yours. You can find that at tstindustries.com. Either way, if you are running some kind of external signals and or a license plate light, we will need to drill a little access hole here so that you can route the wire from the outside to the inside of the bike and then make your connection. Notice here, we have a collar that sticks up from the inner surface, And then in the center of it, there's a tiny little extra circle. That circle was placed there. It was designed in to accept a small drill bit as a hole center. It actually has a conical inner wall that is exactly the same geometry as a standard drill bit head. So this prevents your drill bit from moving around and walking as you're starting your hole. And if we go ahead and step drill through this, we'll be able to remain on center, and then that way it's not required to measure anything. You basically just bust right through. For this particular installation, we will be just drilling for the appropriate size for our license plate light. So we will be step drilling from 330 seconds to 530 seconds. For our metric friends, that will be 2.5 millimeters to 4 millimeters. If you are passing many more wires through, you will have to adjust that size. I recommend going up to maybe 6 or 7 or 8 millimeters. I mean, 8 millimeters will get pretty tight in there, but you can still make it work. But 6 or 7 millimeters through this hole is perfectly acceptable. The inner wall of the collar won't be damaged by that. Now, you should probably be wearing eye protection anytime you drill, and also do not put your paws in the way of the drill bit. That will hurt. Blood's not cool. So I'm gonna hold it like so, making sure that when I penetrate here, no body parts are in the way. I'm using a 330 seconds or 2.5 millimeter drill, and I'm just gonna go slow. All right, that accomplishes my whole center. It's really concentric with the rest of this geometry. It will end up in the center here. So we're good there. I'm gonna switch over to 530 seconds and pretty much perform the same steps. Now, anytime you drill through any kind of plastic, you will notice that you have burrs on the outside. The side that the drill penetrated through will have some burrs. I do have a deburring tool here. I'm using a countersink. I know that some of you guys will not have that in your arsenal of tools. So my second best recommendation is some kind of a blade, such as this utility knife. And you can just pass it along the rim of where the tool exited, and then you end up with a nice, clean, smooth hole, thereby having a really nice way of getting your wires through. And this is the idea. You don't want to have a hole that's too big. You don't want to leave access for water and debris. So at this point, we are ready to go over to the bike and mount this on there, pass the license plate light through, and make our connection. The easiest approach that I've developed for these installations is to take the undertail only, get it placed in the sub tray, push it up, grab one of the pairs of large washer and self-threading screw, and place that in the forward mounts. Once you place that self-threading screw in that boss, let's start the thread a little bit. I'm using a number 2 screwdriver here. Do not want to tighten it down just yet. Just leave it with maybe 2 or 3 threads created. These screws are very specific self-threading screws called plastite. They have a tri-lobe shape screw thread, and they are meant for thermoplastics. All right, now this assembly is still movable. If you're not running a license plate light on your setup, you're good to go to the next step, skip what I'm about to show you. If you are running a license plate light, you can route it now. Now for me, this is my favorite sequence. If you want to make it a little bit easier on yourself, some guys find this easier if when this is routed before you put the undertail onto the bike. I typically just curve my wires like this, pass them through the little hole that we made in the undertail, and pass it out here. I'll grab it with a set of pliers. I'm going to leave plenty of slack down at the bottom and then milk it out later. At this point, what I like to do is grab the longer assembly screws with washers and pass them through the rear holes of our subtray frame and undertail. And before we hop down to the bottom and start attaching our license plate bracket to the setup, I just want to make sure that I have not created some kind of a problem with some of the wiring that passes around the left subcomponent of the frame here. There is a possibility of bulking up wires there, and you have to make sure once you compress the subtray to the frame that your wires are not creating obstruction for the subtray to actually clamp against the frame. And here I'm looking good, and we're good to go to the bottom. I'm going to use a 4mm Allen here from the top in the longer screws in the rear mounts. When we press up, we'll expose the screws, and here I will grab our license plate bracket pre-assembly and get some of the threads started on one side while keeping the other side unattached. And then if you are using a license plate light, you will want to bring it over to the rear and across the top of the flat bracket. Then align your second mounting location, second boss, with the remaining screw that's protruding from the undertail, and engage those threads. Now I like to get this decently close to bottom out, but still leave some adjustability. All right, before we go any further, let's eliminate some of the extra slack on this wire. Now, we don't want to eliminate too much, because if you intend to move this bracket many degrees down, and I really don't recommend going straight down because your suspension travel is going to hit your license plate. But if you're going to experiment here, you want to have ample slack on the license plate light wire so that in the travel you don't end up straining it. But I have adjusted mine to this position because I typically let my license plate rest close to this angle, so I'm going to keep it there. The connection and bulk elimination here will commence a little bit later. All right, let's get this cinched down a little bit more. My hinges are pretty tight. What I want to do here is get those rear locations a little bit tighter down. Now you are turning them clockwise. They will have a tendency to skew the hinge bosses, so you need to hold them in position. You could use a 11mm open-ended wrench to do this, but you can also get them decently tight on this undertail, still leaving just a little bit of looseness. And then at that point, what we can do, and this is a little bit simpler than any other way, we want to center this bracket on the entire assembly. Now, because those L brackets have slots, we actually see a little bit of slot here and a little bit of slot here in the empty holes. So if we just equalize the amount of slot we see and lock down on these components, that will be center now. Now, since we lock down on these connections here, that will keep our hinge bosses pretty parallel to each other, and that way we can actually tighten down on these connections, and they don't have to be super tight if you're using some kind of a thread locking agent. If you're not, they will have to be a little bit tighter to use the preload in the ABS plastic as a method of holding them in. Just make sure you don't strain that plastic. That is not covered under warranty. That is operator error or installer error. Please be careful about how much you actually torque those screws. I don't have a torque value for you because it's impractical to torque these guys against the plastic. So just use caution, and I really do recommend Vibratite as the best solution. All right, now since this is cinched down, I actually do have equal gaps here around the undertail to the subtray. If you've produced uneven gaps, you would have to loosen that a little bit and adjust your subtray against the undertail that you just mounted in, and then tighten it back down. I'm gonna grab my number 2 Phillips and bottom out those screws from the top. Now, since the rear connections are already made and tight, you wanna make sure that the bottom of the undertail is supported by your hand and not deflecting, because that could also strain the undertail across its span. These are, like I said, trilobular thermoplastic self-threading screws. We want to make sure that we bottom them out and give them just a tiny bit of degrees of tightness. Don't want to strain that newly made threaded connection. Please just be careful with that. Technically, we could have ran this wire under this frame component and down the side beforehand, but I also find it pretty easy to get it through like this, and then I don't have a dangling wire getting in my way. You can also pass your wires along the inside here. I just find it to be a little bit nicer to have it on the outside of the frame. So just to the rear of this mounting area here on the frame, there is a way to pass it through to the outside. Make sure you have some slack in there. And then down the side here, now we've produced a lot of bulk here. This is our standard length of license plate light wire. I typically choose to retain that and S-fold it and jam it in somewhere where another bulk of wires against the frame can hold it. If you choose to snip it off and strip a little area, that's cool too. I'm just going out after the least invasive assembly here. So when we pull up on this set of connectors here, it exposes an area where there is a bulk of harnessing, but it does have a void between the frame and the harness. So I like to jam these wires in there. That way they are self-captive. They don't jiggle around. You're going to use something to push these wires in. Make sure it's not a screwdriver or something with a sharp edge, because you could pierce the wires and break your connection. Now, on this particular bike, we already installed our TST Industries integrated taillight. That taillight comes with a harness that replaces the OEM sub-harness that is typically removed with the Fender assembly. So, our sub-harness provides you with these connections. If you are running alternate signaling that reuses the OEM sub-harness here, you would route this wire to the back somewhere where you can access this wired connection, and you would make your connection here. The yellow is the positive, so it would go to our red, and the green is the ground, so it would go to our black. The connection means for our license plate light are these posi-tap connectors. You unscrew the larger end, pass it around the wire that you want to connect into, like so. Then you screw this back in with the piercing element going into the insulation of that wire. Once you get it tight enough, the connection on this end is made, and the rest is done up here. Since we are connecting to here, I'm going to show you the method of connecting to our sub-harness for the TST Industries taillight. We have provided these pigtails for the use with license plate lights. If you're not running a license plate light, you can also attach a USB outlet or any other reason you may have for positive 12 volt that is switched. If you are intending to use your own type of connector, you can undo these little looms and crimp to that. We made loops with a very specific purpose here. Our posi-tap connectors will fit in here really nicely into the loop and rest like this. And what this does is it creates a coaxial connection. So these wires can actually connect to the same axis of wire as this, and just creates less bulk, and I just like less bulk. All right, so our license plate light wires come pre-stripped to a certain length. If that length doesn't work for you, you may want to strip it further down. Now we're going to get this smaller end unscrewed. And since we are unscrewing it from the black connection, we're going to do the black first. Let's do one at a time. We're going to pass the wire through the hole over to the threaded end and make sure that some is exposed. That exposed wire gets clamped against this connection feature here as we screw down on that little cap. Once we start screwing down, you want to make sure that you forward that wire in there really good and then clamp it down all the way and give it just a tiny little bit of tug. Make sure that that connection is actually made. Let's repeat the steps on the positive side. I want to mention that these connectors are not exclusive to TST Industries. If you end up losing some of these components or something gets messed up on you, you can grab a set of these from AutoZone or some other auto store. They are available. Let's now test the light. In fact, we do have the light connected and it's working, so we're good to go. If for some reason your light doesn't light up, I would say check if you've actually pierced the wire that we were connecting into, and also that your connection from the license plate light side is actually contacting the inner metal element in the connector. Check your connection and then you'll be good to go once you redo it and make sure all those parameters are met. Now, at this point, I've already distributed the bulk in here, so this wire just shoves in between the substrate and the frame. We're good to go here. We're powered down, and we could now mount our license plate. This right here on our license plate light setup is a double-side adhesive strip made of very, very powerful 3M high bond tape. This is optional. I technically don't ever use it. In the hundreds of installations I have made without using it, I've never had a problem. This is basically for those guys that worry about losing stuff and they just want to have peace in their mind. If you want to use it, peel it off. If you want to follow my guidance, you don't really have to do it. There's enough pressure from the license plate against it to make it work. Now, we've retained our OEM hardware from the original setup. You could choose to reuse it. If you don't have hardware, you could purchase either the reflective guys from us, or we do offer these anodized aluminum components that look really, really nice as the mounting hardware, and they do complement some of the other anodized parts that we make for this bike. So they are available in several different colors. If you want to pick these up, cool. I am going to choose to use these on here because they just really complete the bike really nicely. Screw an aluminum part from the outside, large washer, nut from the underside. This requires a combination of 8mm hex tool and then a 3mm Allen. I'm just going to get both sides on first so I don't have a cumbersome setup. So once again, this is the same story. I like to apply a little bit of pressure in my hardware connection, but still leave some adjustability. We will need to level and center the license plate and the license plate light. This is pretty simple. Just visually center everything and then fully lock down on this connection. All right, one thing remaining here is to adjust our hanging angle. You can go up as far as that, and this is highly unrecommended because in the suspension travel distance, this may actually hit. You can do something like this, but then it's not visible. It's really up to you. I'm gonna leave it up almost as far as it can go, leaving a little bit of clearance between my license plate light and the undertail. I'll grab a 4mm Allen and fully lock down on my hinges. Careful not to over torque this connection. It does translate the torque and its resultant forces into the undertail, and you can potentially damage the undertail. Now we do have a thread locking agent on there, so it won't let go. We are good to go here. One more test. Boom. Awesome. All right. We've come to the end here. This is the last remaining step, and we've produced some excellent results here. Between the Fender Eliminator and our integrated taillight, this is so clean right now. One thing I do want to note for you guys that is outside of our installation is that these caps like to come off, and I've had them pop off on me many times in the different installations that require the removal of the fender and having the sub tray loose. The flexing will make them pop out. So before you put the bike together and leave, make sure that you account for 4 of these caps. If they're not there or one of them's not there, try to look around so that you don't end up losing it. All right, I really love this look. I hope you guys agree. If you do like these parts or any of the other parts that we have for your bike, check out tstindustries.com. Also, if you like what we do here in these videos, please drop us a comment, hit the subscribe button. That way you'll be served with more videos in the future about this bike and maybe some other bikes you may have in your stable. Thank you for watching. Ride safe. See you later.